if you don't already know, kind of, it's been everywhere. All over the interwebs, the crypto sphere. Sam Bankman-Fried, also known as SBF, the founder of FTX, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for um, basically being responsible for many $billions of fraud, and that will not make anyone whole, that he has to spend that time in prison. What will make people whole is the recovery of funds and delivering it to them ASAP. However, since they're apparently going to be paying people back in the fiat value that they lost at the time that they lost it, as opposed to giving them back their actual crypto, what it means is, yeah, you're giving them back their fiat value, but you're not giving them back their crypto value. And of course, since the time of the collapse, or even right before it, right, when everybody thought, oh, FTX is going to be bought by Binance, right, and then the walls came crashing down, and then the price dropped, okay, but they're going to give them back their FTX value of whatever they had as fiat value in their FTX account. Presumably they're going to give it to them at the low of when it crashed and the funds became impossible to get, as opposed to before the price crashed. But who knows, whatever, even if it's before the price crashed, right, crypto has obviously recovered fully since then and has made new all-time highs very recently, and is, has been up in the $70,000 plus area for a Bitcoin, for example. So a lot of different assets have also recovered at least to where they were before FTX crashed, including some that got hit hardest, like Solana, which has not recovered to its all-time highs, but has recovered to well beyond the point where it was when FTX was teetering on the verge of collapse and then actually collapsed, right? When all the news was coming out and then all the actual damage happened. So, what does that mean? Well, again, it doesn't really mean anything for the average person trading, right? What mattered when the collapse happened, I hate to tell you this, but if you looked it up on the low time frames of volatility, entropy, probability, and statistics, you wouldn't have been surprised by it. Right? Now, there were some people that were surprised by it, mostly because they were away from their keyboard, which is an entirely different situation. But what does it mean for crypto that they put away a guy that they say is responsible for, an $8 billion overall fraud? Well, on the one, hold people responsible and accountable if they commit, serious crimes, and that is true. Even though people say it's a non-violent crime or whatever, to me, theft is violence in a way, because you're literally robbing people, and even if it's financial fraud, it's still theft, and it's still committing violence against people in a way. It's not physical violence, but it is other kinds of violence that, by the way, can lead to physical violence, right? Honestly, it's more of a miracle that more of these financial sort of white collar crime committers or white collar criminals don't actually end up more on the wrong end of violence because of the things that they do. It's really surprising, and it's good that people restrain themselves, but to call it with like this sterile label of being I just don't agree. that financial crimes are nonviolent. When you steal somebody's money, you know, in large amounts like that, and you are hurting them financially, that is definitely a form of violence. And remember, the average person who got hurt wasn't some millionaire, right? The average person who got hurt was some average retail trader who has maybe thousands of dollars in his bank account. Not even tens of thousands, just thousands. That's going to hurt them, right? And the fact that those thousands would now be worth, maybe 10,000 or close to it, or maybe more, would make like a huge difference to their quality of life, right? Like if you lost whatever it was, 0.3 Bitcoin back then, which would have been like maybe, I don't know, $600 or something, right? Maybe $900, like less than 1,000. If you lost a half a Bitcoin, okay, so you lost whatever it was, even far less. Again, if you lost half a Bitcoin would have been like 10,000 or whatever. But if you lost even far less than that, right? Back at the end of 2022, when it was like 30 grand, and then it jumped to 20, and then it jumped to like 15 or something like that, or 16 after 16, 15 after that dump. So it dropped from like 20, 22, something like that. So 0.1 Bitcoin would have been like 2 grand. Okay, so let's say you had like 0.2 Bitcoin, like 4 grand of Bitcoin. Okay, maybe 0.3, and you had like 6 grand of Bitcoin. Wow. You had 30% of a Bitcoin. Okay. Value, whether it was in Solana or BTC or whatever. And now Bitcoin has gone up to like 73,000. So your 6 grand will be worth like 18. That's a huge difference. Huge difference. Okay. For most people, that takes care of a lot of problems and puts them in a level of financial security that seemed unreachable to them. Maybe. Right? I know. If you have a lot, you think, oh, what are you talking about? You're less than 20 grand, you're like a refugee or whatever. The average American family today, 2024, still doesn't have more than $400 for an emergency. In fact, doesn't even have that. And if they have an unexpected emergency that costs them $400, they're in trouble. They can't cover it. The average American family. I'm not talking about average middle class or anything like that. The average American family. Think about how terrible that is. It's frankly devastating, right? It really is. Like if you think about how absolutely devastatingly thin that margin is, that you could be completely busted financially if you had an emergency $400 bill. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's terribly sad. All right, and that's the state of affairs. So, and it's been that way for a very long time, for many years. It's not about who's in the White House or whatever. It's the state of the economy writ large. And by the way, it's better in the U.S. than in most places. Right? The only difference is that in countries where there's more quote-unquote socialism, okay, the state may cover you and make your life more tenable with even narrower margins, because things like your medical, which is a big reason for emergencies, medical is covered, and certain foods are subsidized much more than they are in the U.S. So, there are different ways of governing, and I'm not saying that that's a better way at all. In fact, I'm not a proponent of the socialist model, but I'm also not a proponent of the fake capitalist model, which is part socialist, and in America, that's what you have. Like, okay, Americans love to rah-rah and say, certain kinds of Americans love to rah-rah and say, capitalism is the best and everything. Well, most people alive today, unless they're like 100 years old or older, not even that, 111 years old or older, and they remember things from when they were less than a year old, which is nobody, or practically nobody, especially at that age, right? Unless you were alive pre-1913 or so, when the dollar stopped being pegged to gold, for example, then you don't remember a time when the U.S. wasn't at least partially socialist. Why? Well, because as soon as they removed the peg, right, that was already the first socialization project well underway. What else was a socialization project? Well, have you ever heard of the thing called Social Security? What do you think that is? It's in the name, right? It's a socialization project, right? That is literally, in every form, a socialism project, Social Security. Now, am I against Social Security? No, I get people pay into it their whole life. They deserve what they get. There's no reason to rip away from people who've earned it. To not give it to them would be a crime. But first of all, Social Security actually doesn't apply to everyone. There are a lot of people who don't qualify and who don't get it. Did you know that? There's tons of people who don't get Social Security. What? I thought every job gets it. No, not every job gets it. Plenty of people work their whole lives in ways that they don't qualify for Social Security. So, you want to talk about a socialized system that isn't actually socialized? Capitalist system that isn't actually capitalist? Look no further than the U.S., because it's right there and baked in from the get-go in the way that the whole thing is run. Now, can I point to problems in socialist countries or countries that are more socialist than the U.S.? Absolutely, all day, all night. And they're horrendous in many cases. Okay, like yes, socialized medicine is in many ways wonderful for certain very basic things. But actually, as soon as you need anything more than very basic, which by the way happens to a lot of people, I would even dare say the majority at some point, not a great system, right? When you have fewer specialists, when the specialists that you have aren't quite as good as they are in like the US, because there you have all the top-notch doctors who want to be there, right? And they come from all over the world to be there. You don't have really doctors coming from all over the world to be in other countries. Are there people from other countries traveling to other countries? Of course there are. But is the magnetism of other countries, as the draw of other countries, as great as it is in the U.S.? No. That's why the U.S. is the melting pot, right? There are, arguably Israel is like that too, but it's such a tiny version, right? Right. So overall, I would say, socialism, not so great. Is it the worst thing in the world? No, not in many cases not. Are there horrible places that are socialist? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, 100% there are. But are there horrible places that are also fake capitalists? Yes, there are. There absolutely are. So are improvements deserved all around? Yeah, there definitely should be improvements all around. So what does that have to do with the price of Bitcoin? Learn to trade the VEPs. And you could talk about that. My whole point about this discussion was just to point out the certain inequities of putting somebody away for 25 years, the right and the wrong about it, Right? There's a lot right about it. There are some things, arguably, that some people will say is wrong about it, that it's too long and this and that. Listen, the guy stole $8 billion. Like, not he just accidentally lost by pushing a button. He stole. He used money where he wasn't supposed to use it. Like, he didn't use a few $1,000 here and there. Even that's a lot. Right? He used $8 billion. That's, and he wasn't like doing it just to cover his debts. They were living large, paying for jets to take them around the world to have lunch in different countries. I mean, come on, paying to live in luxurious penthouse suites in Bermuda or whatever. I mean, was it Bahamas, Bermuda, Bahamas? I don't remember. Anyway, whatever, down somewhere around there. Doesn't really matter. Now, hopefully that's the end of that case, but obviously there will probably be appeals and whatever else. In the meantime, hope you stay safe, whatever you're doing, and happy trading.